I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 18th meeting of the Merrimack Trustees of Trust Funds. I'm Chris Christensen. To my right is,
Kathy Schur.
and to my left.
Liz Petrides, trustee.
And Paul Calabria, Finance Director.
And we have guests in the audience this morning. If you want to make sure your green light is on the speaker and give us names and,
Eric Radloff, Consulting Forester, Full Circle Forestry.
Mike Gagnon, Extension County Forester with Hillsborough County.
super, thank you. Okay, first order of business is the minutes of the September meeting. Do we have and I will say that trustee Bill Wilkes is unable to attend this morning, so alternate is Kathy Scher, who is sitting in full voting capacity. So minutes of September 20th, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 20th as written.
Second the motion.
Any additions, subtractions, corrections?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, 300. And this is kind of out of sequence here. I'm going to skip the Cambridge Trust November meeting. We'll come back to that. But we're here for the Watkins Forest discussions. And one of the issues that we're looking at is whether we should do a cut in the next year or so. In order to do a cut, we have to get permission from town meeting, which is in March. And in order to get on the warrant for that, we need to propose stuff in January, even if we might not be cutting until the following January. So it's a long, drawn-out process, but that's part of what we're here about today. So Eric or Mike, if you want to, you've got the floor, whatever you'd like to say.
Oh, good. Good morning, everybody. So I guess the point for today is we're just going to do a quick recap of the Mitchell Street and Lawrence Road parcels known as Watkins Forest, and just kind of get caught up for where we've been over the past couple of years. And then later today, there'll be a field visit for which I've asked Mike Gagnon, UNH Cooperative Extension, to join us to lend insight and guidance for the trustees as well as for myself. It's always good to put another set of eyes on these forests. And from there, what we'll end up doing is I'll put together another package of notes and recommendations that we can move forward with for potential forest management moving forward. So with forestry, we never like to force anything, so we want to make sure the conditions warrant future forest management, and the forest management plans currently allow for forest management basically starting between now and over the next few years. But what we'll do is we'll put boots on the ground this afternoon, we'll check on things, and then we'll go from there. There isn't a ton to add. I'm not sure if you have any of my notes from prior phone conversations or emails, but I am happy to share those with you as well after today, just so we kind of have a dialogue over the past couple of years. But I'm also here today too, just to field some questions and concerns or thoughts that anyone else may have. So I guess I'll open that up, and then we'll kind of guide the discussion. But today is all about just putting boots on the ground and seeing what's going on out there. And I know invasive plants have been more of a popular issue that's been popping up, and I believe it's one of the parcels here, the Mitchell Street parcel has an invasive plant kind of population just to the south of the property on other town property. So we do want to look at that and make sure it doesn't spread into our property and affect our property. But yeah, I'll open it up for questions.
All right, I think everybody has this line drawing. If you don't, you're going to get one in a second.
Thank you.
The purpose of the line drawing is for the Mitchell Street property. You notice there's 19 acres of land that belong to the town, and the Merrimack Village District is planning, or at least has in their long-range plans, 2 wells on that property. We don't have a date for that, but we did negotiate with them some years back and give them an easement on the property for the sanitary protection area and the wellhead protection. So that area is not available for some activity. We can cut and we can do forestry work, but we can't do it as a landing area or put an oil tank out there to feed the tractors or what have you. And I'm sure you guys are all familiar with DES procedures for that type of thing. But when we went through this with them, and they were happy to have us maintain the forest as a tree farm. So that's the issue there. There is access to the Watkins Forest let's call it parcel 1, from Profile Drive. This is for the benefit of people watching at home, if there are any. But that hasn't been maintained. It's a 40-foot right-of-way, and it's pretty much overgrown. So the easiest access is from Mitchell Street through that sandy area where there's a brook, which is the lot line. And then we can access the Watkins Forest parcel, which is, I think, about 60 acres from there. And then parcel number 2 is on Lawrence Road, I think officially number 21, Lawrence Road. And there's about 60 acres there, some of which actually goes into Bedford. And I don't know if we do a cut, what the procedure is for notifying Bedford that we're working on their side of the line. But we'll come to that when we get much farther along in the process. So if you want to just maybe give us a quick summary of what you talked about last time and what we might be looking for today when we do the site walk. We're going to go site walk immediately following or part of this meeting.
So previous findings and recommendations from the 2016 Forest Management Plan showed that that stocking and basal area, so if you want to picture basal area as cutting every single tree off at 4.5 feet, so it's that space that a tree stem occupies. So that's what we use to basically help measure forest conditions, because we shoot for target basal areas. So based on Mike Tower's recommendations from when he wrote the plan in 2016, he felt that thinning's more stand tending as opposed to more heavy
Is
duty.
your mic on?
Oh, yeah, sorry. As opposed to heavier duty regeneration style harvesting was recommended. So these parcels have been managed extensively for the past decades, and this management is just in line with other prior management. So just more of a tending, lighter touch to release smaller diameter stocking within the lower age classes, allowing for the continued growth of the forest and sustainable growth of the forest as well. So these are more kind of maintenance style harvests as opposed to larger heavy duty harvesting, which has also taken place in some of these parcels to create the great growing conditions. So what we're doing today is we're going to review the site, review the growing conditions. We're going to look for insect and disease outbreaks or damage, as well as wind throw potential, and then invasive plant outbreaks. So a lot of times what we find is over time, these landing areas or larger openings in the forested landscape will become colonized by invasive plants. So we just want to keep an eye on that. We had a prior site walk, I believe, 2020, 2019, and invasive plants were fairly limited, and we just want to make sure they're still limited. If we do find a larger population of invasive plants, we can make management decisions and come up with guidance based on that. But that's kind of the gist of it. So this is more of just kind of a check-in and a monitoring style visit. which will help guide decisions moving forward for potential timber harvesting.
Anything you want to add, Mike?
I would agree with everything Eric just said, and it really, every situation is different when it comes down to making forest management decisions. So getting out into the woods and seeing what's happening is really an important part. Invasive plants are here. They've been around a long time. They're part of our management now. If you're not managing for invasive plants, when you're managing forests for long-term productivity, you're not doing a complete job, because they're not going to go away. So we're using the term management, not eradication here. They're widespread on the landscape. Many have been introduced for now hundreds of years, and they proliferate when we disturb sites. So as you mentioned, like landings, those are places where you allow lots of sun and maybe some disturbance, edges of fields, things like that. That's where they get started and then expand their range. So what we want to do is have nice, productive, healthy working forests on our landscape, and we have to consider those invasives as part of it.
I don't think we've ever done any planting. I remember as a kid, as a Boy Scout, doing planting in a town forest. Is there any of that going on in other similar parcels? Or is that, we're just leaving it to natural regrowth?
We're pretty fortunate in New Hampshire and New England that our forests really just come back, aggressively and well when we harvest and we manipulate light. When we allow more light, we get different species regenerating. Maybe the birches or aspens when you have lots of light, or if we leave things alone for a long time, and we get trees that really handle the shade well, like beech and hemlock, and they creep up in the understory. And then around here in Merrimack, it's very sandy. It's really good pine growing ground, so pine and oak should be what we're managing for. There isn't a lot of planting done, because if we manage the right way and we sort of manipulate light and the forests and tend them correctly, we can get that natural regeneration. But there's nothing wrong with doing some planting, although I caution sometimes that if we're planting species that deer really like, we may be just feeding them. So deer is another really important thing to consider on the landscape here, and they're increasing over time, and they're hungry. And unfortunately, they like some of the trees we like to grow, but this is a great town for growing white pine, so the deer tend to avoid those. So in my role as an extension educator, I'm kind of involved in all aspects of anything that has to do with the forests and with educating folks, and that could go all the way from I say K to gray sometimes, but it includes youth, and it includes the general public and landowners. A big part of my job is meeting with private landowners and assisting them with just understanding their land and steps they can take. And then another part of that is working with professionals and learning from them and assisting them along the way. As Eric said, we multiple eyes on the ground is always good, and we like to learn from each other.
When you go in for a cut, how does that affect public use of the properties while that's going on?
It'll all depend on the public use of the property at the time. So we do everything. So say we have a lot of public trail usage, we'll do signage, notifying folks of potential forest management and what that'll look like. We have a lot of towns now, or municipalities or trusts, where there's a lot of folks in the woods. They're starting to do better signage with QR codes that can bring you right to a forest management plan, and starting to really show the public that there's a lot more to just trees being cut, and that there's a whole planning process as well. And then a lot of times we'll also include site visits with extension foresters depending on the county. So we'll bring Mike out potentially once the woodlot's marked, so we can show, because the paint actually it'll paint a nice picture of what trees are to be removed. We'll talk about why the trees are being removed, the process in which the trees are being removed, and really educate folks. Where we have a lot of sensitive trails being impacted by harvesting, a lot of times sometimes we'll end up closing those trails down, and then as part of the timber harvesting work, we'll roll in cleaning up those trails, and just basically kind of managing expectations. So a lot of times we're looking at a 2 to 4 week disturbance out of a 10 to 20 year period, and we try to just get folks to understand that. And then we also, in the case of public land, we like to work with municipalities in different departments just to let them know, said, hey, if you get phone calls, this is what's going on. And this is what, we can tell folks, because we want good communication all the way around, and just kind of comfort people. And we've seen a massive redistribution of population since 2020. So we have a lot of new folks in areas where they may have never experienced anything like this. But yeah, that's kind of, it's all part of it. It's just a lot of signage, communication, and education, especially when there's a lot of public use.
Thank you.
Was 2020 the last time there was a harvest?
Previous harvesting, I believe, was like 2004. It's been a while.
Okay.
So we're-
2002 or 4.
Yeah, so we're pushing.
Someplace turn of the century kind of thing.
Yeah.
Every 25 years.
Seems like a long time, but for a forest, that's kind of right on par probably for, tending operations and harvesting, 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we use this 10-year interval. You hear a lot of foresters, a lot of managers say, oh, every 10 years we'll do something. And the way I like to explain it is, we want to reconnect every 10 years. We don't need to do something every 10 years, but let's reconnect. Let's go for a walk. Let's see how things are doing. But a lot of times, and especially as I get older and further along in my career, it's generally 20, 25 years sometimes. Unless we're doing very specific forest management for regeneration, where we may have like a really short rotational window, maybe like a 5 to 8 year. But in these forest types and in their stand conditions, like Mike said, 20, 25 years realistically.
Paul, any questions from your side?
Just observing and absorbing. Thank you.
Okay. As we move further along, I think one of the things we want to look at is if we need or want to do some removal of invasives. Silver aspen, does that sound familiar? We had some aspen issues last time we were out there, I think. Not severe, but something to watch. In any event, the question is, should we do some invasive control sooner rather than later, or do it as part of a harvest? And just in the back of your mind, we may want to address that.
And
We can't do it from here.
yeah, and the short answer depends. And based on our site walk today, we'll talk about that and kind of get dialed in on those recommendations. But it all depends on populations and potential disturbance. But after today's site walk, we'll have a much better idea.
Very good. Any further questions from anybody?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on down the agenda. I just got my last statement from Cambridge Trust in yesterday's mail. So I really haven't personally had a chance to review it, and I'm guessing the same would apply to everybody else. So I don't think we have anything spectacular to review there. But when you get home and look at it, if within the next week or so, send me an email with any questions or areas that you want to discuss with Cambridge Trust at the November meeting, so that we can prepare them and instead of saying, we'll have to go back and look that up. Last Rest Cemetery, we had a nice meeting with them. I don't think there's anything new there. We seem to have resolved everything at the last meeting, and we have not received a bill from them yet, which I thought we might have had today. Annual reports follow-up. Do we have anything on the reports, Paul, or anything from
The audit? Yep. So the audit team was in here in August for one day, July for one day, and then they were here for almost a week in September. What they're finishing up now is work back at the office and getting the audit finalized. They will be here one more day for a site visit, not for a site visit, but for one last day of data gathering on November 8th. So we're looking at hopefully a December 1st audit, preliminary audit to review with Mr. McCallie.
And that's a preliminary report, right?
That is correct. We do get a chance to have input on that final, before it becomes final.
All right, so at this point, nothing that impacts us as far as we know.
That is correct.
Okay, that's good news. School board presentation. Liz, drafted a letter. I have one extra copy. Did everybody get a copy? Did
Did you get a copy?
I don't think I did.
you get one, Paul?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yep. Perfect.
Do you want to lead off on this one, Liz?
Sure. So it's a letter I drafted to the school board regarding the fact that the Watkins speaking contest in the Lego League has not been held since the pandemic occurred. There is, I want to say, $16,000 in the scholarship fund right now, and there's $12,000 in the, am I backward on that? No. $16,000 in the spelling contest and $12,000 in the speaking contest.
The other way up.
Yes,
The other way
that's the
around.
other way around in the letter.
Thank you. There we go. Yeah, 16,000 in speaking, 12,000 in spelling. We did disperse just under $500 for the spelling fund in March of this year, but we have not done anything, as I said, with the speaking contest. And when the town accepted these funds in 1945, it was under the agreement that it would be run annually. An opportunity would be for the students to, continue to, if they win, they could pursue regional or state participation in further competitions. So the ask is really to understand what their plan is to bring back the Lego League and the speaking contest. At the end of the letter, I basically asked if we could discuss this with them either in person or, we'll make ourselves available to an upcoming school board meeting. So Chris did provide some feedback earlier that I had a mistake in the letter because I had mentioned scholarship funds and Lego League. So I have a correction I'll be making to this. But if we're all amiable to the rest of the contents of the letter, I can send it off to the school board once I make that correction.
It's always, have to think twice, Watkins and Watson. So we
Yeah.
have two funds for different things related to the schools. So yes, it's always on the tip of my tongue that I've got the wrong one.
Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm going to be very self-conscious about this forever, so I better know it from now on. Kathy, did you have any?
No, I
Feedback?
think the letter looks good with that correction.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, I don't know if we need a motion, but we can make a motion to approve the letter and have it sent with that minor
Amendment.
correction.
So should I move
Sure.
that with the corrections we've discussed, that the letter be sent to the school board?
Oh, second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, 300. I'm ahead of myself. It says authorization to pay scholarships. That's usually a November item.
Oh.
So I'm gonna just skip that. Sometimes we get scholarship applications or requests come in December when we're not meeting. Other correspondence, we received $5,600 as an additional contribution to the Timothy Gibson Memorial Scholarship Fund, and a request to increase the scholarship from 4,000 to 5,000. And we have sufficient funds to do that and still maintain a cushion. So if somebody wants to move that, then I think that's something we need to do, and then we can notify the scholarship committee.
Okay. I'll make a motion to increase the scholarship, the Timothy Gibson Scholarship from $4,000 to $5,000.
I'm gonna second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
300. Future meetings. I'm gonna call it a future meeting because it's here on the thing, but we're gonna recess from here and go to the Watkins Forest site. And that page didn't print anything. Then November 22nd, and that will be a meeting with Cambridge Trust to totally review the portfolio as we do every so many months. And I guess the other thing is to see if there is anything that would normally come before us that somebody wants to bring up that isn't on the agenda. Seeing nothing, I will declare us in recess to the site walk and reconvene at, want to do Mitchell Street first? Okay. And it is 9:32.